There is a certain kind of conversation that leaves a person feeling like they ran a marathon while standing completely still. 20 minutes of explaining, defending, clarifying, and somehow, by the end, apologizing for something that was never their fault in the first place. In this video, we will go through exactly why some people have mastered the art of verbal warfare, how silence becomes the one weapon they have no counter for, the psychology behind why manipulators need your reaction more than they need oxygen, and much more. Most people believe that arguments are about finding truth. Two people disagree, they exchange perspectives. Eventually, one side makes more sense, and resolution follows. But that model assumes both people entered the conversation with the same goal. Some people do not enter conversations to understand, they enter to win. And winning for them does not mean reaching agreement, it means watching the other person crumble. There is a pattern that repeats itself across countless interactions. It begins with a statement that is slightly off, slightly unfair, slightly accusatory, just enough to provoke a response. And the moment that response comes, the game begins. Every word spoken becomes ammunition. Every explanation becomes evidence of guilt. Every attempt to clarify becomes proof of defensiveness. The person who did nothing wrong somehow ends up being the one apologizing. Marcus Aurelius observed this dynamic 2,000 years ago when he wrote that the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. But there is a layer beneath that observation he did not fully explain. The best way to defeat someone who fights with words is to refuse to give them any words to fight with. Silence is that refusal, not the silent treatment that punishes through withdrawal, not the passive-aggressive avoidance that seethes beneath the surface. Strategic, deliberate, powerful silence. The kind that communicates without speaking. The kind that says, I see exactly what this is and I am choosing not to participate. Manipulators are performers, and every performance requires an audience. Every provocation needs a reaction. Without reaction, there is nothing to work with, nothing to twist, nothing to escalate. A fire needs oxygen to burn, and reaction is the oxygen that keeps manipulation alive. Cut off the supply and watch the flame die. Viktor Frankl survived the concentration camps and emerged with observations that changed psychology forever. One of his most powerful insights was that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies the power to choose, and in that choice lies freedom. That space between what someone does and how a person responds is everything. Most people react instantly. Someone says something provocative, and the response flies out before thought has time to catch up. That is not a choice. That is a reflex. And reflexes are predictable, exploitable, controllable. But a pause changes the entire dynamic. A deliberate moment of nothing disrupts every expectation the manipulator had about how the interaction would unfold. The first time someone tries this, it feels unnatural, almost painful. There is an internal pressure that screams to defend, to explain, to correct the lie, to set the record straight. Every instinct pushes toward engagement. But when that pressure is resisted, something shifts. The other person gets confused. They threw a hook expecting a bite and nothing happened. So they throw another hook, harder this time, more provocative, more outrageous. Still nothing. Now there is frustration, maybe even panic. The usual playbook is not working. The buttons that always produced results before are producing nothing. This is the moment most people give in. The discomfort gets too intense. They think if they just say something, the tension will ease. But that is exactly what resets the game to zero and teaches the manipulator that with enough pressure, eventually there will be a crack. The power of silence comes from outlasting the escalation. Robert Greene spent years studying power dynamics across centuries of history, and he noted that silence makes people uncomfortable. They fill the void with their own words, often revealing more than they intended, contradicting themselves, exposing weaknesses they meant to keep hidden. When someone stays quiet and truly observes, patterns become visible that were hidden before. The way certain people never actually answer questions. The way they redirect every conversation back to themselves. The way they rewrite history mid-sentence, counting on the other person being too busy defending to notice the revision. Once these patterns are seen, they cannot be unseen. There is a military concept called starving the siege. When an army surrounds a city, they expect either surrender or counterattack. What they do not expect is for the city to simply wait, to conserve resources, to let time become the weapon. Silence is starving the siege. It refuses to give the attacker what they came for, and over time, without the fuel of reaction, even the most persistent manipulator either gives up or moves on to an easier target. There is a distinction that matters here. Silence as avoidance is weak. That is when someone goes quiet because they are afraid, confused, or hoping the problem will simply disappear. That kind of silence does not command anything. It just delays. Silence as strategy is different. That is the silence of someone who has recognized the game for what it is and understands that some battles are not won by fighting harder, but by refusing to fight at all. Epictetus taught that humans cannot control what happens to them, only how they respond. Most people hear that and think about choosing better words, calmer reactions, more rational arguments. But sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Something happens internally when this is practiced over time. The desperate need to be understood starts to fade. Some people will never understand, not because they cannot, but because they do not want to. Understanding would require them to take responsibility, and responsibility is the last thing they are interested in. Once that need for their understanding dissolves, they lose their power. The game only works when both people are playing. When one person steps off the board entirely, what remains is just someone swinging at shadows, performing for an empty room. For a manipulator, that is the worst defeat imaginable. Not losing an argument. They have lost plenty of those and simply rewritten history to make themselves the winner. But being irrelevant, being unworthy of response, having their entire performance ignored like it never happened, that is the one thing they cannot recover from. Silence is not weakness. It is not giving up. It is not letting them win. It is the loudest possible statement made without a single word.